We're going to get started with the next panel here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sean Ganley. I'm a partner in Thompson Hines New Ventures Group, and I'm excited to be here today to introduce our next panel. Early stage VCs, growth equity, and buyout investors all view AI through a different lens. This next conversation highlights how investors at varying stages assess AI opportunities, what's overblown, and where real long-term value will be created. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Jeffrey Stern, who's a principal at the O.H.I.O Fund, founder and host of the Lay of the Land podcast, among other things. Jeffrey, take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Stern. It's wonderful to be with all of you here today to discuss a topic that is the topic du jour, for better or worse, occupying an increasingly large amount of our brain capacity, and we're going to add to that allocation today by having a conversation about AI. And I want to frame what we'll talk about here today in the context of technology adoption lifecycle, which tends to follow a normal path of the innovation itself, some inflated expectations about where that technology might go, a leveling, often called the trough of disillusionment, and some realization in the middle between the hype and the reality in the plateau of some actual realized benefit to society through the technology. We're going to talk about the delta, where we are in this life cycle, where we're actually seeing AI play out in practice, where the innovation is actually manifesting into improvements into companies across all the different life cycle stages. And we have, I think, the perfect panel to explore what that delta looks like and what those implications are across the different life cycle stages for companies, from startups all the way through to mature operating businesses. So with that, I'll introduce the panel here. We have Jamie Weston from Spring Mountain Capital, Hardik Desai from JumpStart, Peggy Roberts from Riverside, and Candace Matthews-Brackeen from Lightship. Again, representative really of the whole life cycle of companies here, so we'll get a great perspective on really the whole landscape. So to kick it off, I kind of wanted to start with signal and noise. Obviously it's hard to go a day without talking and thinking about AI, so there's certainly an amount of hype that is there. Where are you all collectively seeing the delta in your minds, practically? Hardik, maybe you want to kick us off.
Maybe. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'll begin with data. I just provided this data to our LPs a couple days ago. The PitchBook does this sort of venture monitor report that they put out, and we just looked at the data for the last 6 months or so for 25, and 65% of all capital that went into venture had something related to AI and ML, at least in sort of how PitchBook compared that, aggregated that data. But that was across 35% of the deals. So now you look at the reverse of it, and 65% of the companies who weren't AI in any capacity got 35% of the capital. So the capital clearly is going more and more towards AI. The other interesting data point was round over round increases in valuation for AI companies versus non-AI companies. All AI companies were sort of significantly higher increases in valuation compared to non-AI companies. So whether we call it hype or not, that's where the money is going. That's where all the trends are, and I don't think any of us can ignore them.
I'll just add a couple more another data point to that. Something like 20% of all dollars invested now have been invested in what's known as sort of traditional VC, but 80% are now invested in much larger, more highly priced rounds that were traditionally led by like Fidelity's or Wellington Managements of the world. Candace can talk to this a little bit better than I can, and that's as Hardik just said, really driven by all these later stage large investment rounds around AI.
I'm not sure. Okay, there's no light, so it's hard to understand. talking. Just keep talking. We'll figure it out. Yeah. And I'm going to lose my train of thought, so just keep going. Keep going.
Awesome.
Can I weigh in with something?
Absolutely.
Okay. If the question is, are we in hyper reality? I think we're in experimentation mode when you think about the actual application of AI technologies in businesses. So the money is going after the dream, which is appropriate. Money should go after the dream. But when it comes to what we're seeing actually enabled on the ground in companies, I think we're still very much in the experimentation phase, which is exciting, and a lot of what I think we're going to talk about today as well.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the early hype, if you will, was kind of around a lot of the conversation and the questions that I heard from founders and investors alike was, where is defensibility in this space? Like, what is actually a durable business model? And you had at kind of the original go of startups in the wake of AI, wrappers around models. And then I think more over time, the conversations kind of converged, much to how every company today is a technology company. AI is a layer within a company that's going to help, enable them to do and solve whatever problem they're trying to solve better. So I want to have a conversation as part of this broader conversation about actual AI companies versus products versus like features that are AI, and just where you see AI actually manifesting within startups and where it's actually driving value.
Yeah, I would say like you have to kind of weed out right away, and we talked a little bit about kind of building a team. So what I look for is, are you leveraging AI or are you building artificial intelligence? And there is a huge difference between the two. So that's the layer you're talking about. So we immediately go to the team, right? I am looking at the team and who they are, what schools they went to, PhD, do you have multiple PhDs? How many PhDs do you have on your team? Matters. Because if you tell me you have an AI company and I ask you who's building it, and you can't answer who they are, what lab they came from, who they studied under, I am not putting as much money or any money as you think I'm going to, because it matters to me as an AI investor. Because you can't defend that, because the science matters to me as an investor. It's not so much about whether or not you're using it a little bit to make an incremental change, because you don't own that technology.
And let me take the other side of the investment focus. I co-run a early stage investing vehicle. It's about $130 million. And I only mention that because we are not, and because of our size and early stage focus, we're not investing in LLMs or infrastructure. We may look at some of the compliance or governance tools in the middle, but we're really looking for companies that are utilizing AI into their workflows, that are experimenting and making the most of it. Let me just take a very simple analogy. Let's say you're building a hole, pretty big hole, and you've got a small backhoe, right? You got a small backhoe and you have a shovel. So what do? You walk past the backhoe, and you pick up the shovel, and that hole is going to take you weeks to get done. Whereas if you use the backhoe, it could take you a couple hours, could take you a day, maybe at most. And why are you not using the backhoe? Well, you're not using it because you don't know how to use it, and you're afraid to use it. So you really have to figure out how to use that tool or any tool that's available for you. So the way to think about it, or we do, is like, what are the holes in your business that you need to build? That's not the only hole that you're going to have to build. I mean, there's going to be lots of holes in your organization you're going to have to build. And so I'll, later on, I'll talk about some of the holes that we're digging, with different tools in our organizations.
So Peggy, in your world, there is, I'd say, the companies you're dealing with are companies that they're not necessarily trying to figure out product market fit. They're beyond that life cycle. They're companies that have already figured it out. How are you seeing those companies? They've already dug holes. They probably dug 10 holes already. So how are they thinking about AI as it applies to their own businesses, where they're not really probably starting from scratch, but are thinking about how to best leverage it?
Right, and I think I love Jamie's analogy. So at Riverside, we invest in a variety of businesses on what we call the lower end of the middle market. So starting with businesses as small as $2 million in ARR, SaaS software companies who have discovered their product market fit at that early stage, and we can back them and partner with them, all the way up to businesses with 300 million in sales across diversified industries. So we've got over 120 companies in our portfolio today globally, and we see everything when it comes to where businesses are on the AI spectrum. And I think the hole digging, therefore, is highly variable depending on the business and the model. Recent example in our Acceleration Capital Fund, which is again dealing with some of those smaller SaaS software businesses, is a company called CircleLink Health, and they introduced an AI-enabled tool that basically can help onboard patients who have chronic care conditions, so a nurse's time is not taken up in that onboarding process. An agent can actually perform that work. So they've expanded, for a medical practice that would have once subscribed to their software that was looking for this tool to help the nurses onboard. Now they can sell a much bigger opportunity set to those medical practices to say, we can solve your labor problem, right? We can not only give you the software and the guts to onboard people, but we actually have the agent who can help do the work. So that's a huge enhancement in value proposition. To use your question earlier, where is the value? That's a great example of where the value is.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it in radiology. You're seeing it in dentistry quite a bit with telehealth, and your dentist just reviewing what the AI has said. We're seeing that in fertility with women, and it's helping them to get pregnant. So there's a lot of ways that people over the next 10 to 20 years will really be able to leapfrog others by enabling their company.
So we are probably at the earliest spectrum, at least on this table. So we are investing seed, early Series A or late seed, whatever you want to call. And Jamie is a great partner because everything that he said are the sort of businesses that we are sort of building. And then groups like Spring Mountain Capital are then coming, as follow-on investors in those businesses. But we are also really, really hyper-focused in the Midwest and predominantly in Ohio historically. So for us, that presents an opportunity to look at all the legacy industries, whether it's logistics, whether it's healthcare, whether it's manufacturing. How are those businesses thinking about AI? We are looking at a company currently in the healthcare space as an example that's in prior authorization. And we hear tons and tons of sort of what's happening with prior authorization. And I'll just throw this statistic out for this particular company. That customer is a health system. A large health system is waiting on 30% of that monthly revenue being stuck in prior authorization queue because human beings are doing that work. AI can easily automate a significant portion of that work and accelerate the path for revenue generation for the health system. That's just one example of hundreds of examples where there are very specific pain points to be solved. Historically, it would have taken a long time to build the software, build the moat around it, or build the product around it. But AI helps accelerate the pace of development, accelerates the pace of launching an MVP, launching new features quickly and showing value quickly to the customer.
I want to revisit the defensibility idea. So with all this, with the increased velocity with which companies can actually build product because of AI, with the amount of things they can now automate because of AI, how do you think about what makes a business defensible when every company can kind of innovate at this?
Well, not everybody is innovating at this speed, I probably should note. And you're really looking for companies that are on the cutting edge of trying to figure things out. So once again, not to be too simplistic about things, and we can get into more details about tools and real focus of the companies that we invest in. Like, this is a difficult but simple business. Right? There's a team of people that are producing a product that are serving some particular marketplace. Your customers don't care how you deliver that product or what are the things that happen in between to get to what you're providing them. They just want a better product. They want a better solution. They want a better service or whatever it is. So, everything that you're doing to improve your workflow, your internal efficiencies, to improve the product offering. Like they don't care. They just want it to be better. So in that lens, you know, how do you evaluate businesses to try to keep on that cutting edge? And as I said, you know, we're not investing in the core technologies themselves, but in the software companies that are utilizing these things. So you have to find people that are willing to take those risks, because there's always going to be somebody from a defensibility standpoint that, you know, and we can get into it more, but that could use some of these tools and kind of leapfrog you.
And I would add, so in our acceleration capital fund, where we're investing in, usually these are critical software systems, right? So it's B2B, SaaS software. And since the launch of ChatGPT, our customer retention rates have actually gone up by 2 points. And so when you think about defensibility, you know, our companies, to Jamie's point, they're delivering a service, they're delivering a product, whatever it is. As long as you continue to make them happy and don't give them a reason to be shopping around, I don't think customers want to uproot a relationship they have unless they're sort of being let down by the vendor that they're working with. So we're leaning in with these businesses on how do we develop in the infrastructure, how do we develop in our product or our service to integrate AI.
Yeah, I would also say there's a bit of a talent war right now. I mean, we're seeing people making $100 million because of what they have going on up there in their heads. But the customer doesn't care, like you said. The customer doesn't care that somebody's going to go from OpenAI to Facebook to Google. They just want the best possible product. But it's hard to defend that. And the fundraising that's happening in that space is absolutely incredible to watch.
But I guess, you know, going back to Jamie's comment, distinguishing between infrastructure and applications, right? There are going to be a few winners in the infrastructure space. I don't know that there are only going to be a few winners in the application space. It's no different than in the late 90s, you know, everyone was talking about Cisco being sort of the dominant player because they were an infrastructure company. And then eventually that sort of changed into a whole bunch of startups. You know, Amazon and everyone else came after them, and they built the products that were solving specific problems. So in some ways, this is sort of a repetition of that 30-year cycle again, which is how you started this with, right? Which is, yes, there are going to be a few winners in the core application or infrastructure, but there are plenty of problems to be solved, and there are plenty of opportunities to solve those problems.
You introduced, I think, the fundraising idea, which we haven't talked so much about. A lot of folks in this room, I think, are if not explicitly working on that right now, might be in the near future. And I think, Hardik, you kind of set the stage with some of the statistics about how the landscape for fundraising is changing. How would you counsel people, founders specifically, entrepreneurs, thinking about fundraising, where we are today in this life cycle, and how, if at all, does AI change how they should approach fundraising?
Well, I don't think the answer is, you know, putting AI into the title of your deck or your product. And I'll just come back to basics again. You know, if you're not showing the results, or you're not really conveying utilization of AI to fundamentally change the way your product is being provided to your customers, why does it matter? So, you know, just get back to basics and tell a good story around why you're different than others. And sure, you can utilize AI into that conversation around how you're deploying it, how it's making you more efficient, how, you know, you're not using it, burning as much cash, and all the cool things that you ultimately can do with your customers, you know, at that nirvana state. You know, that's an interesting conversation.
Go first.
Yeah, I would just say with AI, you can build something early. So build something before you come talk to us. I think that's the advice. You've got free code. You can go out there and build it in advance and just then come and talk to us. Spend time with us. Build a network. Go sell it, right? You can go sell it. So come to us after. People aren't writing early checks to ideas unless you have exited multiple companies. That's the only time I'm doing it. I'm not putting money into a first-time founder with zero experience for the very most part.
So the lens I'll share with you, again, just keeping in mind, we're looking at, very early stage SaaS software companies all the way up to very well established, still lower middle market, but, more diversified businesses. And we've developed we call it an AI scorecard, not very inventive, but it's a tool that we use during due diligence when we're looking at a business to evaluate them along two main dimensions. And I'll just share that with this group. It's a simple rubric that we have. The first dimension is looking at you sort of inside your four walls, right? So how are you using AI, whether it's in your sales, marketing, operations, finance, accounting, you name it, how are you building that in? Secondarily, it's how you're using AI from a product or service perspective. Are you building it into your product, which is a lot of what Candace is talking about? If it's a software, company, how are you building that into your offering? If it's a services-based business, how are you building it into that offering, like the CircleLink example I used earlier? And then third, what are the governance structures you have around it? So if we go in and meet with a company and they're like, I don't know, and we don't really have a policy for that, and we don't have those security, whatever, it's a red flag. So that's kind of bucket A. What is the company doing about the company's business? And then bucket B is looking at the market you're in, and how do you answer those questions about how the competition is embracing AI? Is there a significant market opportunity opened up by AI because of what we can now do? So really spending time thinking about that before you meet with an investor on both the inside the four walls and the outside the four walls impacts from AI.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I guess, maybe if we go back just to the very, very basics, it all begins with trying to solve a problem. So the entrepreneur identifies a problem that he or she feels needs to be solved, right? Do some research, do some validation, build first version of a product, get some early traction. There are a whole bunch of things that need to happen just to get to $1 million or $2 million in revenue. How does the customer buy? Who is the right buyer? How do you go through a sales process? All of those things there are great tools from an AI perspective that can accelerate the journey for the company to get to that product market fit quickly, which enables them to continue to then raise more money.
It's pretty funny. I mean, ChatGPT's been out for less than 3 years now, and particularly over the last year, the experimentation and the utilization within businesses is just widespread, and it's pretty amazing. And now, we're at the point where we're talking about, okay, that's great, but let's just talk about the business again, and it's a tool to accomplish a particular goal. So it's funny that we sort of gone full circle. I just want to touch on engineering and code for 1 second, right? So a bunch of our companies use GitHub Copilot, or they use Cursor, or they use Claude for code suggestions, code editing, code refactoring. Once that code's done, then we'll use AI tools for QA, for automated testing, right? Once that product is almost to be ready to be released, it could take 2 weeks to put release notes out. Now it takes a couple hours to do. But what Candace said was interesting from a startup perspective, and the same thing with our companies around product experimentation. So we can run 10 different prototypes at the same time now, when we could only do one before. And most importantly, that prototyping work can be done not from the engineering side, but from the product side. So your leverageability to experiment, is vastly expanded.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to the experimentation. I mean, I've seen companies on the marketing front, what used to require months to, A/B test thousands of different versions and renditions of the same campaign, you can now spin up A/B test and create this competitive bracket style marketing where you invest in the winners in a matter of hours and test, 1,000 campaigns. So I want to pull on that thread because I think one of the things that's changed, and Candace, you mentioned at the earliest stages, is you can now, there's no excuse for not having an MVP. You can just spin up a project that's functional, that you can get user feedback on, that you can begin to sell. How have your expectations changed about how companies are using this and what they need to be doing now that they couldn't before, that it's unlocked, that maybe before, due to lack of resources or lack of time, they couldn't do, but now there's less of an excuse at each kind of respective stage of the life cycle.
I don't know if my expectations have changed. I still expect a great company. Yeah, I think they need to be leveraging all of the tools. I think maybe when I was an emerging fund manager, my expectations were different. But I think just from kind of growing up in this career, I still expect the highest level possible. So I don't know if they've changed. I'm just still looking for excellence.
I would say and I would encourage anybody in the room, again, who's entering into conversations with investors, is to really have the ROI story buttoned up. So if you have introduced, AI into some part of your product, service, or your internal operations, what's been the ROI? Show me the story over time. The proof is in the pudding. And then we can start talking about what the future could look like together. That would be sort of some of our expectations.
I don't know that any expectations have changed from our end. If anything, you can build product quickly and get some feedback quickly. So you will have data points coming back quickly.
Our metrics haven't changed. Our metrics haven't changed. I still just have to return capital at the highest level possible. So can you do that? Yes or no?
Well, I mean, from Hardik's perspective, I think it's even more challenging when you have all these companies that can spin up pretty quickly. Getting to your point, Jeffrey, on kind of moat and defensibility, what's sustainable, right? When you have a company that's got customers that you can leverage the technology to build upon and stay ahead, that's a totally different story, but when you're talking about de novo businesses created in, a garage, so to speak, I mean, it makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, and at least in our sort of overall portfolio, what has pre-AI, post-AI, what has always been sort of a really, really strong indicator is how much does the founder understand the industry that they are operating in. Right? So it's a lot easier to, if you are from the industry, to build the right product, have the right set of conversations. And we use, as part of our diligence process, we spend a lot of time trying to understand the background of the founder to have some perspective on, are they the right people who can build this product in the market they are operating in?
So in this broader hype versus reality topic for AI, I think, one of the I think human elements to this is it's kind of exhausting to just think about AI all day, every day, and to stay abreast of all the changes and reconcile with the reality that this is the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. It's only going to impact businesses more from here. How personally are you staying abreast this world? I mean, obviously, I think from the investor's perspective, you get to meet with all these companies, so you get to see how they're experimenting. But I mean, just personally, how are you trying to keep up with all of it?
I'll just say real quick, because this is my spouse exited a facial recognition company. So he was building AI 13 years ago. He sold that company back in 2018 to a private equity firm. So we valley of the nerds. All of his friends, now my friends, are the PhDs I'm talking about. So they kind of all know each other, and all of that information, whether I hear it on a Zoom or we're at a meetup, we spend a lot of time in that world with those people in the weirdest little coffee shops and the old co-working spaces. They're there just with each other, and so that's how we stay abreast. It's not necessarily seeing it on TechCrunch or out in the news. It's the actual practitioners who've been building it for a long time.
Yeah, I want to join the Valley of the Nerds sometime. That sounds like fun. So I'll share maybe just a couple anecdotes from inside Riverside, if that'd be helpful. Again, we're global, so we've got 300 employees around the world, and we have a fantastic CTO who sits in New York, and he's just been an amazing job building the culture of experimentation and encouraging people to lean into how we can use AI. This is in our own business. I'm not talking about the portfolio companies now. We evaluating deals, sourcing investors, everything, how we run our back office, all that stuff. And so that's been really, really refreshing. And I think one of the, so we've been workshopping, we've been pulling in consultants, we've been looking at our data models, we've been just doing a lot of creative work from the ground up. But the thing that I think keeps us the most honest is our investors, so the folks that give us the money to deploy into companies, are asking us all the time, what are you doing about AI? And so that's really kept our feet to the fire to do the best we can. Nobody has an answer, right? I said experimentation earlier on. I think nobody has an answer to what this truly could do for our business, but I'm enjoying the journey, learning along the way. And then I do want to just build on one quick thing that Hardik said earlier about the founder or CEO of a business and the industry, right? That they know the industry when you're giving them money. I think for us, that also is a predictor of how smart they're going to be in using AI. Because when you think about opening up a new market, a new value proposition, you need somebody who really knows the business that they're in. And we're constantly making tough choices around our leadership teams and making sure we have the right talent in the seat and surrounding our CEOs with the right talent. And that's a big part of the conversation.
You asked personally, so I'm trying to figure out if my 9-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old, when he says, let's ask this question to ChatGPT, should I be paranoid about it or should I be excited about it? Let's ask this to ChatGPT. Right? So, I guess, maybe just on the, jokes aside, and I used this example in our prep call last week. We invested in a K-12 company that's growing well, doing really, really well. 6 months ago, 9 months ago, when they were going to the conferences of school superintendents, the theme everywhere was AI. 3 months ago, when they went there, no superintendent wanted to talk about AI. And that's the reality that everyone is trying to figure out, right? And so as you are growing, scaling a business, how do you think about the customer's perspective? How do you think about how your customer, who is also getting bombarded and hammered with everything AI, everything in their life, right? So how do they react to it? And how do you adapt your sales cycle, your messaging to those customers?
Yeah, I don't think that there's any consistency within our portfolio companies around usage or standards. And I think there's a lot of experimentation. Some people are more engaged with it than others, some teams more engaged than others. Over time, I personally think there needs to be like an AI quarterback at a company, particularly when you get to particular scale, right? That AI quarterback will sort of see the whole field. They will understand what's happening within their organization, but importantly, hopefully, they will have their finger on the pulse of the things that are happening in the industry. It's also critical for licensing, right? When you sort of have these little individual licenses. But we're tool agnostic, and just one example, like one of our companies, and a couple of our companies use Gong, which is a solution to help you record your customer interactions, your customer conversations. And so they flow that Gong data into an LLM, and they get incredibly rich feedback on their customer conversation, which builds over time. It's almost a de facto survey that just sort of keeps happening. Now, we don't use that across our company. I just should note that we do that in a separate instance of LLM because it is private customer information, so it doesn't go out. But that should be done across our organization, and I'm positive it's not.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and just reminded me to, in our portfolio companies, trying to encourage the experimentation and knowledge sharing that they're developing with each other. So bringing the CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, whoever might be sort of in the lead together into working group sessions to talk through the challenges they're facing in their business. I think the concept of a quarterback is a real one. I think the biggest frontier in my mind, especially for our more established companies, is education and training, enabling our workforces to adapt and adopt AI in their workflows. It's a real challenge. It's cultural change. So if you're trying to battle those headwinds in your organization, having somebody who that's their job to worry about.
Can I say I totally agree. I heard a podcaster recently say that if you're putting training in for AI for your employees, you've already lost the battle, right? I sort of disagree. You need to have some baseline level of education.
There's no better practice for learning than trying it in theory. I mean, the reverse of that.
Yeah, but I think, and sorry, I'm like soapboxing this for a second, but we love investing in education and training companies at Riverside, and I think that the use of AI in our workforce, so I'm not talking about PhDs in the Nerd Valley, I'm talking about people that are in our companies doing their day-to-day jobs. They need to think about things differently, and that doesn't happen overnight, right? So we have to help them, come along that adoption curve and understand how they need to think about their job, their data. How are we structuring data? How are we accessing data? What are great uses for this? And that's in my mind, that's the current wave that we're riding up.
So, in the last 2 years, I am continuously impressed by folks who've been able to leverage AI to the greatest effect in their companies. And the question I want to ask, I'll ground in like an example that I've seen, but just to like explicitly show everyone here like how powerful this is in practice, because I do think there was a lot of hype, but I mean, I've seen a company double their EBITDA in 1 year through a very tactical implementation of AI. And this is not, this is like a, call it 7-figure, 8-figure business. So these are like material changes. And that's not hype. Like I've seen that happen. And so I'm curious from all your perspectives, like what have you seen that has most surprised you about practically, ways that this is materially altering the trajectory of companies?
Maybe that's my fault. I'm sure they hate me back there. I'm sorry. For us, it's for accuracy. So we have a company in our portfolio that supports fertility, like women getting pregnant. So it's called Prove. It's a progesterone ovulation test. Right now, it's a urine-based test. So you pee on a strip, and you take a photo of it, and there's a color change. The accuracy over the last year has increased so much that we're seeing thousands more babies being born. And that's a metric that matters. That's, for us, a metric that matters. It was the AI that made necessarily anything else.
That's pretty
That's
powerful.
a good one. I mean, how are we going to top babies? We're going to top babies. I was going to use like a really horrible example. I'll just keep using it. Forgive me.
We've talked about backhoes. We've talked about Nerd Valley.
Holes.
So you use
Yeah.
yours.
So this is a company called Partium, which is a funny name, but they were sort of like a ERP system for like sort of complex supply chains. So if you're in a repair kind of business and you're having to source a part to fix something, you would use Partium to help you find the part and track down the part. So similarly, this is what made me think of it. We're using photography now to just snap a picture of the part, and up comes where that part is. And again, this isn't just back in my warehouse. This goes deep into a supply chain to figure out where do we need to get this part to get it out to the engineer. So that is, it's basically having the time that an engineer or that one would spend to fix a repair issue. So when they sell to, one of their big customers is the railway system in Germany. The engineers on those trains, the trains are down, whatever it is, that you can source the part, get it fixed, get it back on its way in half the time that you could before. So it's not babies, but it was very powerful, all through, using image technology.
Yeah, you know what? Let me add one more thing, because I'm excited about my company. Why that matters for us is that company started as just like a really easy analog thing. You pee, you make it work. We're trying to test. We're making this thing work. She's now figured out how to do it continuously, so that a woman will be able to wear this, and eventually she'll know right away when it will work for her. And so those changes, especially in healthcare, we're just going to see things move leaps and bounds. And it's just that kind of easy utilization. Like, P&G owns Clear Blue Easy, and they could have done that too, right? They had the right to win by being the first mover in that space. and just using technology, just bringing together a small and scrappy team of people who are willing to use new technologies has allowed something really big to happen. And so all of these legacy companies with legacy ideas can really do the same thing.
Yeah, I think, at least in our portfolio, it's just building blocks of incrementality of these things that are kind of, and maybe you don't necessarily appreciate unless you dug in exactly all the progress that's been made. I just want to build a small vision of the future for customer interactions, particularly with software companies. So, you would say, okay, well, why don't you attach some sort of text-based LLM that you can ask your data questions? Well, we're not there yet because people are uncomfortable. They don't necessarily know what questions to ask. And it's not in their workflow, right? It's just not necessarily right now part of their DNA. So what you need to do as the vendor, as the provider of the technology, is to identify the most salient insights from that data that you can for them. Let's say the top insights. That's number one. And then number two, data in and of itself has no value unless you bring knowledge to that. So number two, you have to say, okay, what does that data mean for you, customer? And then the nirvana part of it is to say, okay, we're going to use AI agents and we're going to take action on that recommendation or what you're looking to do. And then you sort of complete the circle for your customer. I think when you get to that point in time, it's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say we have about 90 companies that are active in our portfolio. Some were funded 3 weeks ago and some were funded 17 years ago. So everyone is trying to figure out, across the spectrum, across multiple industries, manufacturing, healthcare, software, right? So they are all in every aspect of what they are doing. The founders are trying to figure out what are those incremental improvements in efficiency, which when you add all of those things together, can be a meaningful change to their top line, bottom line.
So I think we'll work to bookend the conversation here with a lightning round of sorts. We're sort of all in the business here of investing in the future. And with that comes some prognostication about what you think the future might look like. So to round it out, I think, and grounded again in this hype versus reality conversation, in the next 5 years, what are you most looking forward to actually becoming reality as a consequence?
I would say, just wearing my Midwestern Ohio hat, we are going to be driving multiple industries and multiple applications and use cases of how AI is transforming those industries.
Yeah, I mean, we deal with the application layer, so I mean, selfishly, I guess I'll say we think the most change is going to happen at that application layer. So some of the things that and we may not be investing in these areas, but some of the things I think are fundamentally going to change. Drug discovery. So you can run simulations of particular molecules within a simulated body environment and get to answers so much quicker. That's pretty cool. There's personalized and adaptive learning, right, on the education side of things. That's going to perhaps fundamentally change the education system. You've got from the finance side of things, you can work with risk management and compliance, maybe your own financial portfolio to get to a better place. And then Peggy, you may have mentioned logistics. I think logistics and the optimization of the whole supply chain, logistics, could fundamentally just be so different and I don't know, fixed, but vastly improved.
Really, in general, the human experience is going to completely change. I don't know if any of us really know what 5 years from now is really going to look like. I think we all will be healthier, lots of people wealthier, and a lot more babies, a lot more babies. And we'll have new problems to solve because we may have automated our way out of a lot of things, including jobs we're doing today. So 5 years from now is just really going to be interesting.
And Jamie took like all the industry sectors that I was going to say. No, just kidding. We at Riverside, we've done, I think over 120 now education and training deals. We love that space. We don't do a ton in K through 12. We do a little bit, but mostly it's post, it's corporate training, things like that. So we think that's the frontier to be in. It's an exciting place to invest in. AI is going to have a ton of applications there, and we're all about levering up the workforce.
If I may.
Please.
To close this out, we are going to seed a company. Spring Mountain Capital is going to do follow-on investment in that company. Riverside is going to acquire that business, and Candace is going to fund all of us.
Love it. Love it.
And that we got a red light.
It's perfect. That's perfect. Well, I just want to thank all of you for tuning into this conversation. You know, despite the comment about, I think, the exhaustion that we have about, perennially talking about this every day, it's also on the same side of that coin, endlessly fascinating. So, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but if any of you, want to just chat about it, I don't think any of us have the answer. It is ever evolving. So happy to continue the conversation. But thank you all.